this new report, it's really interesting. But so, why is China targeting governors and other state and local officials?
Yeah, so China realizes that the U.S. system is fragmented and decentralized. Historically, that's
what?
I
don't think she means that kind of fragmented and decentralized. I think she means the on-purpose one.
Got it.
Sort of limiting the authority of federal government kind of constitutionality, right?
This is
Glad
our
we clarified.
Yes, exactly. And that's one of our strengths, right? But Beijing also realizes that can be used against us. And the decentralized system can be used as a window in, because subnational governments, they're not used to using national security as a primary, or thinking about it really in general, but it's certainly not their mandate. Weak players within them can be identified, they can be picked apart, and their mandate is really to ensure short-term economic boons for their localities. And that's precisely what China promises, even if Beijing doesn't usually follow through with that.
They don't follow through?
It's a real shock, right? But yet, that mistake keeps being made over and over on the part of state and local governments. And we talk to them, right? And we say, here, this is a threat. And increasingly, they seem to be receptive, but the response is, wait, you mean a Chinese company says, we're going to come invest in a solar facility in my state, and I'm supposed to say no to that? And that's a surprise, because that goes against everything that state and local officials are supposed to be doing.
Yeah, I would imagine there would be some kind of backlash from their constituents that, why are you doing this?
Why can't we have this money to build a thing?
No, right? Why are they getting, Chinese workers and Chinese companies to build these things? Why?
I mean, I don't, but what you're talking about, Emily, is the fact that governors are supposed to be bringing more economic activity to their state, right?
Exactly. And there's pushback if they say, wait a second, that economic activity, or they think their risks being pushed back. If they say, wait a second, that economic activity comes with a whole lot of strings attached, and these companies might not be like all other companies who are offering us actual economic development.
I guess that just seems so shocking to me, because, we live and breathe, China. It's kind of hard to imagine that really none of these officials have any clue that the Chinese Communist Party is an authoritarian regime that might not be on the up and up, that there might be some kind of collusion between companies in a communist country. I don't know.
I mean, Emily, you said you talked to some of these officials. What is their reaction usually?
I mean, I think again, as you said, we live and breathe it, right? And we know that there's no such thing as a private Chinese company, that any economic outreach on the part of a China-based entity is fundamentally guided by the Chinese Communist Party's agenda. But, a state local authority that's used to economic development projects, they probably aren't going to think of that first. They're just not, they're not steeped in this. And even the federal government isn't. It's still a battle for the federal government to prevent Chinese transport companies from filling the contracts for our national infrastructure. And if the federal government, which is the national security arm of our system, hasn't realized that, then it isn't a huge surprise that state local authorities aren't entirely on board. That said, I do think they're waking up to it. And I think that, they're very much activated by the interests of their communities. They don't want to hurt their constituents. And so I do think that there is a growing receptiveness on their part to the risks of China's influence efforts. That said, there isn't always an alternative. They need investment. And if the only player that's coming to them and saying, hey, we're going to invest in new industrial facilities in your state is a set of Chinese players, what else are they supposed to do?
That's actually very interesting. It's like the Belt and Road.
Yeah, we were just talking about this related to, other countries in Africa or Southeast Asia or something, where maybe China is the only country saying, we're going to give you loans, we're going to invest here. It didn't really occur to me to think about the fact that could be happening within the United States.
Yeah, that's a really good point. We as a system are in precisely the same boat. And I don't think we realize it, which also, of course, means that we don't realize the degree to which Beijing is turning our system against us. in the same way that China is turning the international development system against the world.
I was thinking about the Australian state of Victoria, and Premier Daniel Andrews had a few years ago signed essentially a Belt and Road deal directly with China, even though he's the premier of a state and not a federal official. And there was quite some controversy about that in Australia. But I was like, oh, well, this is an Australian thing, and he's kind of a one-off. But perhaps it's not. He's not such a one-off if this is happening across the U.S.
Yeah, Australia is actually interesting because because of cases like that, they've really woken up to this problem, and they serve as a good example, at least in terms of their analysis, of having recognized what China's state-local influence efforts entail, and at least already started discussing this. Whereas we're kind of late to the conversation in terms of realizing this is happening.
You think the U.S. is behind Australia on this?
In terms of recognition that it's taking place, yes. I don't think that conversation about China's subnational influence efforts is in the drinking water here, whereas a lot of the English language conversations you'll see about it, we did in our research, were coming out of Australia.
Well, until this podcast comes out,
Right.
in which then all the kids on TikTok will be talking about this.
That's right.
Oh man, that's a whole other story.
I would say Australia really should be the koala in the coal mine. No, that's never mind. I apologize to everyone watching for that.
people really like koalas. They don't like to hear them getting hurt, Matt.
That's true.
Well, yeah,
That
but
was
then
what
it's
your
a good
joke was
case.
about.
Look what China's doing to those koalas.
Hey.
There we go. You're absolutely right, Emily.
Title of the episode. Well, so in your report, you mentioned that there was a Chinese think tank that actually studied the attitudes of U.S. governors towards China. What did they find?
So one of the most remarkable thing about China's subnational influence efforts is how explicit they are about what they're doing.
It's always the case. They're always very, very clear about what they're doing, and yet
It's like we're planning to take over the world. It's in our white papers. It's in our
Nobody-
5-year economic plan.
Nobody reads white papers, Matt.
I mean, they should.
And quickly before I answer your actual question to the Australia point too, there are a bunch of Chinese academic discussions about how the U.S. system is such that you can develop parallel diplomacy efforts. And if you don't like what's going on at the national level, you just get the state level officials to do your bidding. And in the same way, you can have a Belt and Road type agreement on the part of an Australian state leader. You can have a U.S. governor carry out exactly the industrial plan you want him to carry out, even if Washington has decided that it's going to compete with China.
Right. Actually, that reminds me, because I'm from California, and I remember our former governor, Arnold Schwarzenegger, was like, he went to China to explore getting China to build a high-speed rail in California. More recently, Governor Newsom bought millions of masks for COVID from China, despite him, he could have bought them from the U.S., right? So a lot of these governors are, even in California, where you'd think, they live and breathe China's air, right? They should know. And yet they're like the furthest behind.
But high-speed rail, it wasn't just Schwarzenegger. I remember Richard Daley, who was the governor of Illinois until like 2011, did the same thing.
Because Illinois needs high-speed rail?
That was, it was like
Wow,
kind of like
okay,
praising
great.
China's high-speed rail and wanting Chinese companies to come build high-speed rail in Illinois.
Wow. To get to all those top destinations in Illinois.
Well, I mean, Chicago's in Illinois, so
I guess that's true. Okay, fair enough. I forgot that Chicago's not its own state.
okay.
Chicago actually has a close, I think, sister city relationship. No longer a city, but it's like a pretty core player within China's efforts to use sister city relationships to foster influence.
yeah, that's definitely something we want to talk about.
There we go. But on the California case, there's also a whole case study, like a Chinese academic case study of Jerry Brown, the former governor, and how he and China's relationship with him is a perfect exemplar of how to carry out, quote unquote, parallel diplomacy or subnational diplomacy.
Ooh.
Well, I want to hear about Jerry Brown. Well, he's no longer governor, so, it's okay. It'd be okay if you were governor, too. But yeah, I'm interested to hear that, because if it's a good example of it, how did they influence him?
the has included, and I might butcher it now because I haven't read this case study in some amount of time, exchanges. So simply cross exchanges to China / to the US, joint investment, I think some university focused stuff. I'm now forgetting the details, so fault on me for raising this case study. But I think what was most striking about it was just that you could identify a particular area, so California, and then carry out an entirely different form of diplomacy and approaches within / in parallel to the larger country-to-country relationship.